Today on Woodworking with Wes, we're going to talk about a dado set. A dado set is something that is very necessary if you have a table saw in order to make cuts that are wider than just the thickness of a blade. But there's some things you need to know about a dado set in order to set it up properly, how to use it properly, and the things that it can do. So let's talk about that. First thing let's talk about is the different parts to a dado set. These are your outside blades, and there is a definite left and a right, and I'll show you that in just a second. And these are the chippers that go in between to give you the spacing. One of the things that I want to show you on this dado blade is you'll have a square cut on one tooth, and then you'll have an angle cut on one tooth. The angle goes to the outside. So this would be, if I was setting up the blade, this goes to the outside, this other blade goes to the outside, and the chippers go in the middle because of these sharp teeth that go to the outside. And that just cleans the dado as you do it. It makes sure that your bottom of your dado is square and flat. So let's go ahead and set up a dado. We're going to set it up to 3/4 of an inch. So this will be our first blade. Set that up on our saw. Put it over there tight. Our chipper. Now, one of the other things that you need to do, let's move over here. You need to make sure these carbide heads are wider than the thickness of the steel that it's connected to. So if you'll notice, the thickness of the steel and the thickness of the dado of the carbide head is wider. So you need to make sure that as you put your chippers on and put your blades on, that you don't line up right next to one another. You want to make sure that you line up so that the teeth are offset so that they don't cause any trouble. Get my glasses on here so I make sure I get it set up correctly. Right like that. You can see my teeth are offset. Let's set up another chipper. And I like to space my chippers. If I'm setting up 3 chippers in the middle, I like to set up my chippers so that I'm about equal distance between all 3. So let's turn this around a little bit, put it like that. Then let's set up our final chipper. So that we're there, and right now our chippers are all set up so that I'm about that distance set up, and then I want to turn my blade around here so that when I put on my final outside cutter that I can make sure that I don't have it set too tight against the carbide head either. There. Okay, so you can see my carbide heads don't line up right next to one another. This is the middle chipper. Here's the outside chipper. So our carbide blade now is set up correctly. We'll finish putting on the flange and the bolt for our cutter head. Get my fingers in here. And sorry, my arm is in the way, but that's what you got to do. Okay, and then you want to tighten it down good. There's our wrenches. Give it a good tug so it's good and tight. There we are. Now, the throat that you use for your table saw has to accommodate the thicker dado set. So this is your standard throat for the blade. Here's your throat for the dado set. So we'll set this off over here. There we are. Now I'm going to set this way down like this. And I always stand off to the side. Turn it on, make sure everything runs smooth, and we're ready. Okay, I want to point out a safety feature. While I was changing my dado blade, I turned the saw off so that there was no power to the saw while I was changing the blade. Then when I turned it on to check it, I turned it back on to make sure that, or to test the blade, and turn the power back on. But always when you're working with a blade, make sure your power is off so that you don't have any possible injuries. We've got our dado blade set up, and we're going to just dado a little bit to show you some of the things that a dado set can do. I brought some melamine. I banded the edge of my melamine because if you are going to do any melamine or any wood that you'll have a banding on, you'll want to band first before you dado. But I'm just going to show you how we dado a few things, give you an idea of what is available and how I would use a dado set when I would use it. So let's watch and see how I do. Let's run a dado. We're going to just do a real shallow dado. And what I always try to do is I usually start out low and then crank up until I have the depth that I want. So let's start right here. There's the beginning of our dado cut. We want it to be a little deeper. This is a standard dado cut right here. And it can be any depth and any width that you want it to be. But this is what a dado blade does. This is a typical dado cut. Now if we did it on the end of the board where it was open on one end and like that, that's called a rabbet cut. But this is a typical dado cut. If I were using this as a junction between two boards like this, I would dado only about that thick so that I still had plenty of thickness and strength in my board, and this would be used strictly for alignment purposes. The same if I was using it on the end of it for a rabbet cut. Let's make a rabbet cut. Now there's two ways to make a rabbet cut. I could put a sacrificial fence and put the blade up tight to it, or I could run my rabbet cut on the outside like this. And so that's what we're going to do right now. We're just going to set this out like this, and we're going to make another cut. That becomes a rabbet cut. You can use that also for a junction. See what a nice junction that makes there if you put the two boards together. One of the places that I've used a rabbet joint before is drawers, when I've made drawers, and I'll use it if I were to put a joint together like that with the right thicknesses and the right dado. That makes a nice tight corner for a drawer. It'll do the same for cabinets. And you can use the dado for many things to line things up, but mostly it's important to make sure that you get it set up correctly and that you know the things that it can do. Lots of little tricks like this as you become more experienced in your woodworking skills. There's lots of accessories to your table saw that will make your work easier, give you options. The dado blade is the first one that I would get. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time on Woodworking with Wes.